The morning mist rolled across the smoke-breathing hills like the exhalations of some sleeping giant. Kilira stood at the edge of the precipice, her heterochromatic eyes, one silver, one deep amber, scanning the landscape below. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face, but she remained motionless, a statue carved from the same obsidian rock that jutted from the earth around her. Today marked her 20th trial of shadow rending. 19 times before, she had hunted. 19 times she had killed. 19 times she had returned to the capital city of Scyther with the blood of outsiders still wet on her blade. But today felt different. The air tasted of change, though she couldn't name it. Huntress, a voice called from behind her. She didn't turn. She recognized the raspy tone of Elder Kvar, one of the few who could approach her without triggering her instinctive defensive posture. The council awaits your departure, Kvar continued, his weathered boots crunching on the volcanic gravel. Your prey has been located. A human male, sole survivor of the crashed survey vessel. Kilira's jaw tightened slightly. Humans. They had been probing the edges of Lither's space for decades, always claiming peaceful intentions, always bringing their technology and their questions. The Lithar response had been consistent. Death to any who set foot on their sacred soil. Where? She asked, her voice low and measured. 3 kilometers south, near the Weeping Stones. He's injured but mobile. The tracking drones lost him in the canopy an hour ago. She nodded once, a gesture so subtle it might have been mistaken for a trick of the light. Without another word, she stepped off the cliff. Kvar watched as she plummeted 20 meters before catching a protruding branch with one hand, swinging her momentum to land cat-like on a narrow ledge. Within seconds, she had vanished into the forest below, leaving only the faintest rustle of disturbed foliage in her wake. The Weeping Stones earned their name from the constant moisture that seeped from their porous surface, creating an eternal symphony of dripping water. Reed Voss pressed his back against one such stone, trying to steady his ragged breathing. His left arm hung useless at his side, dislocated during the crash. Blood had dried in a rust-colored streak down his face from a gash above his eyebrow. He had been running for hours. The emergency beacon from his ship had been his first priority, but the locals had found and destroyed it within minutes of the crash. Now he was alone, injured, and being hunted on a planet whose very atmosphere seemed hostile to human life. The forest around him pulsed with alien life. Bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie blue-green glow in the perpetual twilight beneath the canopy. Strange calls echoed between the massive trees, some melodious, others that sent primitive warnings skittering down his spine. Reed was a doctor, not a soldier. He had joined a Stellar Survey Corps to help establish medical protocols for new colonies, not to play cat and mouse with alien hunters. But here he was, using every scrap of wilderness survival training he'd reluctantly endured during his orientation. A twig snapped. Reed froze, his good hand instinctively reaching for the small plasma cutter he'd salvaged from the wreckage. It was a tool, not a weapon, but it was all he had. The forest fell silent. Even the ever-present hum of insect life seemed to pause, as if the entire ecosystem held its breath. Then he saw her. She emerged from the shadows like smoke given form, her movements so fluid they seemed to defy the laws of physics. Tall and lean, with skin the color of polished bronze, she wore form-fitting armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was her eyes that captured Reed's attention, one silver, one amber, both fixed on him with predatory intensity. In her hand, she carried a blade unlike anything he'd ever seen. The metal seemed to shift and flow, as if alive, its edge gleaming with a darkness that hurt to look at directly. Human, she said, her accent strange, but her standard perfectly comprehensible. You are Reed Voss, survivor of the vessel Infinite Horizon. You stand accused of trespass on sacred Lithar soil. By the ancient laws, your life is forfeit. Reed swallowed hard, his mind racing. I didn't choose to crash here, he said, keeping his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. My ship malfunctioned. I'm not an invader. I'm a doctor. Your intentions are irrelevant, Kilira replied, taking a step closer. The law is absolute. And you're the executioner? I am Kilira of the Shadow Dance, first Huntress of the Western Reaches. I have never failed in a trial. You will be my 20th victory. Reed noted the pride in her voice, but also something else, a weariness, perhaps. He was trained to read people, to understand the subtle cues that revealed inner turmoil. Even across species, some things were universal. What if I refuse? He asked. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the first real emotion she'd shown. Refuse. To die, Reed clarified. What if I simply refuse to die for your ritual? For a moment, she seemed genuinely puzzled. Then, faster than his eyes could follow, she struck. Reed barely managed to activate the plasma cutter, its beam intersecting her blade's path. The two energies met with a shriek of protesting physics. The force of the impact sent him tumbling backward, but he rolled with it, coming up in a crouch. Kilira stood where she'd attacked, studying him with new interest. You blocked the Z-Thakor. No off-worlder has ever. She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she launched into a series of attacks that should have ended him. But Reed had spent years studying xenobiology, including the motion patterns of various predator species. He couldn't match her speed or strength, but he could anticipate, dodge, and deflect barely. The dance continued for several minutes, Reed giving ground steadily, using the environment to his advantage. He led her through a patch of explosive fungi, triggering a chain reaction that sent spores billowing through the air. While she was momentarily blinded, he scrambled up a tree. When the spores cleared, Kilira found herself alone in the clearing. She tilted her head, listening. A slow smile spread across her face, the first she'd worn in years. Clever, she murmured, then began to climb. Reed had made it 30 meters up before he realized his mistake. The tree, if it could be called that, was a colony organism. As he climbed, it began to react to his presence, branches curling inward, trying to trap him. He was so focused on fighting free that he didn't see Kilira until she was upon him. Her blade flashed, and suddenly he was falling, the branch beneath him severed cleanly. He hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, her blade was at his throat. It's over, she said. Reed looked up at her, gasping for breath. Is it? He wheezed. Something in his eyes gave her pause. Not fear. She'd seen plenty of that. Not anger or hatred either. It was disappointment? In death? She couldn't tell. You're not afraid, she observed. Oh, I'm terrified, Reed admitted with a pained laugh. But I'm also curious. You could have killed me a dozen times by now. Why the game? This is not a game, Kilira snapped, but her blade wavered slightly. Isn't it? You're the Huntress. I'm the prey. You chase, I run. You attack, I defend. If it's not a game, what is it? It is duty, honor, tradition. Whose tradition? Whose honor? Do you even know why your people kill outsiders? Or is it just what you've always done? The blade pressed closer, drawing a thin line of blood. You know nothing of our ways. Then teach me, Reed said softly. You have my life in your hands. What's a few minutes of conversation before you end it? Kilira stared at him, this strange human who spoke of death like an academic exercise. No one had ever questioned the trial before. They begged, they fought, they ran, but they never asked why. Our world was once enslaved, she said, surprising herself. The Korvathi Empire held us for 3 centuries. They came as friends, then revealed themselves as masters. When we finally won our freedom, we swore never again. No outsider would set foot on Lidhar and live. That was what, 500 years ago? 537. And you're still fighting that war? We are surviving, she corrected. The galaxy is full of empires. We will not be slaves again. Reed nodded slowly. I understand, but I'm not an empire. I'm just a doctor who took a wrong turn. The law makes no exceptions. Then the law is flawed. Her eyes flashed dangerously. Careful, human. My name is Reed, he said, and you're Kilira. We're not just categories, human, Lidhar, hunter, prey. We're individuals. That has to count for something. It doesn't, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then why are we still talking? She had no answer for that. Instead, she raised her blade for the killing stroke. Reed didn't close his eyes. He watched her, this deadly woman with her mismatched eyes and her burden of tradition. He saw the conflict there, the war between duty and something else, something she couldn't name. The blade descended and stopped, a hair's breadth from his neck. Kilira's hand trembled. In 20 years of hunting, she had never hesitated. The Zthat core had tasted the blood of 19 souls, and each kill had been clean, precise, honorable. But this human, this Reed, he wasn't playing by the rules. He wasn't just refusing to die. He was refusing to be what she needed him to be. An enemy, a threat, a validation of everything she'd been taught. End it, she whispered, though whether to him or herself, she couldn't say. I can't, Reed replied gently. Only you can. But ask yourself, what will you be ending? My life, or something else? The blade remained frozen in place. Seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, with a sound that might have been a sob or a curse, Kilira pulled back. She stood abruptly, the Zthat core disappearing into its sheath with a whisper of metal. Get up, she ordered. Reed struggled to his feet, his injuries making the process painful and slow. What happens now? I don't know, she admitted, and the honesty of it shocked them both. No one has ever. The trial must be completed. Then completed. She looked at him sharply. You want to die? No, but I won't run anymore. If you're going to kill me, do it as Kilira, not as the Huntress. Make it your choice, not your duty. She stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away. After a few steps, she paused. Follow me. Where are we going? Away from here. The drones will return soon. And then, she didn't answer, just continued walking. After a moment's hesitation, Reed followed. They traveled in silence for hours, Kilira leading them through paths that seemed invisible to Reed's eyes. The forest grew denser, darker, filled with sounds that made his skin crawl. But Kilira moved with absolute confidence, occasionally warning him of hazards with a gesture or a quiet word. As night fell, or what passed for night on Lidhar, she finally called a halt in a small clearing dominated by a massive tree with a hollow trunk. We'll rest here, she announced, beginning to gather materials for a fire. Won't that attract predators? Reed asked. Yes, but they know my scent. They won't approach. Reed settled against the tree, exhausted. His arm throbbed, and the various cuts and bruises he'd accumulated were making themselves known. He watched as Kilira built the fire with practiced efficiency. Why haven't you killed me? He asked finally. She didn't look up from her work. I'm still deciding. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She sat back as the fire caught, the flames casting dancing shadows across her face. You interest me. I interest you. Reed couldn't help but smile. I'm flattered, I think. You shouldn't be. Interesting prey often dies slowly. But there was no real threat in her voice, and Reed heard what she wasn't saying. He interested her not as prey, but as something else, something she hadn't encountered before. Tell me about your world, she said suddenly. Earth. Reed blinked at the change of subject. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with your becoming a doctor. So he did. He talked about his childhood in New Melbourne, his father the engineer, and his mother the teacher. He described medical school, the long hours, the first time he saved a life. He spoke of joining the Survey Corps, of the worlds he'd seen, the people he'd helped. Kilira listened without interruption, her eyes never leaving his face. When he finally wound down, she asked, why help others? What do you gain? Gain. Reed considered the question. I suppose. Purpose. Meaning. The knowledge that I've made things a little better. Even for strangers? Even for aliens? Especially for them. Medicine doesn't care about species. Pain is pain. Suffering is suffering. Healing is healing. And killing, she asked softly. Is killing the same across all species too? Reed met her gaze steadily. I suppose it is. The end of possibility. The silencing of a unique voice in the universe. That's why I try to avoid it. Even when your life is threatened. Even then, though I'll defend myself, as you saw. Kilira was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I have killed 19 souls in the trials. Each one was different. Some begged, some fought, some tried to bribe me with technology or promises. But they all died the same way, at the edge of my blade, for the honor of Lidar. And how did that honor feel? She looked into the fire. Heavy, each time heavier. They sat in silence as the fire burned down to embers. Reed dozed fitfully, exhaustion finally overcoming his watchfulness. He woke to find Kilira standing over him, her blade in her hand. "It's time," she said. Reed's heart sank, but he nodded. He struggled to his feet, facing her without flinching. "I understand. Do you?" She reversed the blade, offering him the hilt. "Take it." Reed stared at the weapon, confused. "What?" "Take the Z-Thac core. If you can wound me, even a scratch, I'll let you go. The trial will be satisfied. And if I can't, then you die." Reed looked at the blade. Even in the dim light, it seemed to pulse with its own dark radiance. "I'm not a fighter, Kilira. Neither were the others. Take it." Reluctantly, Reed accepted the weapon. It was heavier than it looked and warm to the touch, as if alive. The grip felt wrong in his hand, designed for a different anatomy. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "Then you'll die." She stepped back, falling into a ready stance. "Begin." Reed held the blade awkwardly, trying to remember the basic combat training from a core. Kilira circled him slowly, her movements liquid and predatory, even without a weapon. "Attack," she commanded. Reed lunged clumsily. She sidestepped easily, her hand blurring out to strike his wrist. The blade went flying, and Reed found himself on his back, Kilira's knee on his chest. "Pathetic," she said, but there was no mockery in it. "Just observation. I told you I'm not a fighter. Get up. Try again." They repeated the exercise several times, each ending with Reed disarmed and defeated. But he noticed something she was teaching him. Each time, she corrected his stance, his grip, his footwork. She was trying to give him a chance. On the 7th attempt, Reed managed to keep hold of the blade for almost a minute. He even forced Kilira to block once, her forearm deflecting the dark metal with a ring like a struck bell. "Better," she admitted, stepping back. "Again." "Why?" Reed asked, breathing hard. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want you to understand," she said. "To see what I am, what I was made to be. A killer, a weapon, forged by tradition, honed by duty. I have no other purpose." Reed straightened, still holding the blade. "That's not true, isn't it? What else am I good for? You're a teacher. You're teaching me right now." She froze, as if the words were a physical blow. Reed continued, "You're also curious, thoughtful. You ask questions. You listen to answers. You're not just a weapon, Kilira. You're a person. Persons have choices," she said bitterly. "I have duty. You have both. You're choosing right now. You chose to talk to me instead of killing me immediately. You chose to bring me here. You chose to give me your blade, to give you a chance to die with honor." "No," Reed said firmly, "to give yourself an excuse not to kill me." She moved so fast he barely saw it. One moment she was meters away. The next, her hand was around his throat, lifting him off the ground. "You know nothing," she snarled. Reed didn't struggle. He met her eyes, silver and amber, fury and pain. "Then teach me," he gasped. She held him there for long seconds, her grip tight enough to bruise but not to crush. Then, with a sound of frustration, she released him. Reed fell to his knees, coughing. "You impossible man," she muttered. "Why won't you just die properly?" "Because," Reed wheezed, "I refuse." Despite everything, Kilira laughed. It was a short, sharp sound like breaking glass, but it was real. "You refuse. As if death cares about your refusal. Maybe it doesn't, but you do." She turned away, running her hands through her hair. When she faced him again, her expression was calmer, but infinitely tired. "The sun will rise soon," she said. "By law, the trial must end with the dawn, one way or another. Then we have time," Reed said, getting to his feet. "Time to figure out another way. There is no other way. 20 trials, 20 kills. That is how it has always been. Until now." She shook her head. "You don't understand the consequences. If I fail, if I return without your death, I lose everything. My rank, my honor, my purpose. I become nothing. You become free, Reed corrected. Free? She laughed again, but this time it was hollow. Free to be an outcast? Free to be shunned by my own people? Free to live with the shame of failure? Free to choose, Reed said softly. Free to decide who you want to be, not who tradition says you must be. And who would I be? She challenged. Without the hunt, without the honor, what am I? I don't know, Reed admitted. But isn't finding out better than never asking the question? Dawn came too soon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Kilira stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the light spread across the horizon. Reed sat nearby, the Zethak core lying on the ground between them. It's time, she said without turning. I know. She faced him, her expression unreadable. Stand up. Reed rose, his body protesting. The night had not been kind to his injuries. Take the blade, she ordered. Kilira. Take it. He picked up the weapon, holding it loosely. Now what? Now we end this. Attack me. No. You must. If you won't try to kill me, then I'll have to kill you. Those are the only options. I disagree, Reed said, setting the blade down again. There's always another option. Not for me. The words tore from her throat. Don't you understand? I can't go back empty-handed. I can't face that shame. Either you die, or I do. There's no middle ground. Reed studied her for a long moment. Then he walked to her, stopping just out of arm's reach. Then let me make it easy for you, he said quietly. He knelt before her, baring his neck. Do what you must. Kilira stared down at him, her hands clenching and unclenching. Get up. No. If my death is the only way to preserve your honor, then take it. I won't fight you anymore. Get up, she shouted. I refuse, he said simply. She turned away, her whole body shaking. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I can't. Why not? Because you're right, she admitted. Because you're not just prey anymore. Because killing you would be wrong. Reed stood slowly. Then don't. But the trial? Damn the trial, Reed said firmly. Damn tradition. Damn honor. Choose life, Kilira. Choose change. She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Tears she hadn't shed since childhood. I'm afraid. So am I, Reed admitted. But we could be afraid together. The sun climbed higher, its light reaching into the clearing. In the distance, they could hear the hum of approaching drones. They're coming, Kilira said. I know. They'll expect. They'll demand. Let them demand, Reed said. What will you answer? She closed her eyes, standing at the crossroads of everything she'd ever known and everything she might become. When she opened them again, her gaze was clear. I'll tell them the truth, she said, that the 20th trial is complete, that I found something more valuable than another kill. And what's that? She smiled, a real smile this time, transformative in its genuine warmth. A reason to question why we kill at all. The drones broke through the canopy, circling them like mechanical vultures. Kilira picked up her blade, sheathing it with finality. Stay close to me, she told Reed. This won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, he replied. Together, they walked toward the waiting drones, toward judgment, toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in her life, Kilira felt the weight of tradition lift from her shoulders, replaced by something lighter and infinitely more precious. Hope. The journey back to the capital was tense. The drones flanked them, recording everything, transmitting their heretical survival back to the council. Kilira could imagine the uproar, the disbelief, the rage. What will they do? Reed asked as they walked. Call for judgment. Demand explanation. Possibly order my execution. Our execution, Reed corrected. She glanced at him. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment you chose not to kill me. We're in this together now. The capital city of Scyther rose from the jungle like a fever dream, all soaring spires and floating platforms connected by bridges of grown crystal. As they approached, crowds began to gather, whispers spreading like wildfire. The Huntress returns, but the prey lives. Impossible. Blasphemy. Guards met them at the city's edge, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks. Without a word, they escorted Kilira and Reed to the council chambers. The Hall of Judgment was a vast, spherical room, its walls covered in the preserved weapons of 10,000 trials. The council sat in a ring around the chamber's equator, 12 figures robed in black, their faces hidden by hoods. Kilira of the Shadow Dance, the chief elder intoned, his voice echoing in the spherical space. You stand accused of failure, of weakness, of betraying the sacred trust of the trial. The prey lives. Explain. Kilira stood in the center of the chamber, Reed beside her. She had not been permitted to clean herself. She still wore the dirt and blood of the hunt. But she stood tall, meeting the council's hidden gazes without flinching. I succeeded, she said clearly. A ripple of outrage ran through the chamber. The human lives, another elder spat. This is success. The trial demands a hunt, Kilira replied. I hunted. It demands a confrontation. We confronted. It demands resolution. We found one. The only acceptable resolution is death, the chief elder thundered. Says who? Kilira challenged. Show me where in the ancient texts it specifies death. Show me where our ancestors wrote that blood is the only acceptable ending. Silence fell. The elders exchanged glances. At least, the subtle movements of their hoods suggested as much. The precedent of 5 centuries, one began. Precedent is not law, Kilira interrupted. Tradition is not truth. We have killed for 500 years because we chose to, not because we had to. Careful, Huntress, the chief elder warned. You walk the edge of heresy. I walk the edge of evolution, she countered. Our people have remained static, trapped in the amber of our own fear. We kill outsiders because the Korvathi once enslaved us. But the Korvathi are gone. Their empire fell 300 years ago. Who are we really fighting? We fight to remain free, an elder shouted. No, Kilira said firmly. We fight because we've forgotten how to do anything else. We've made a prison of our freedom, walls built from the bones of those who might have been friends. She turned to Reed. This human is a healer. He came to explore, to learn, to help. He crashed nearby. Accident. Where's the threat? Where's the dishonor in showing mercy? Mercy is weakness, the chief elder stated flatly. Is it? Kilira asked. Or is it strength? It takes no courage to kill a defenseless man, but to stay your blade, to question centuries of tradition, to risk everything for what you believe is right. That takes true strength. She unsheathed the Zethak core, holding it high. The dark blade seemed to drink in the chamber's light. This weapon has tasted 19 lives, she declared. Each one fed our fear, our isolation, our stubborn pride. I say it's time for a different kind of strength. Before anyone could stop her, she drove the blade down into the floor of the chamber. The ancient metal screamed as it shattered, fragments scattering across the polished stone. The council erupted in chaos. Guards rushed forward, but Kilira held up her hand. I'm still a citizen of Lithar, she said loudly. I demand the right of challenge. The chamber fell silent again. The right of challenge was ancient, predating even the trials. Any citizen could invoke it to question a law or tradition, but the price of failure was death. You would challenge the trial itself? The chief elder asked, his voice barely concealing his shock. I would, Kilira confirmed. I challenge the necessity of killing outsiders. I challenge our isolation. I challenge our fear. And what do you offer in its place? Growth, she said simply. Change. The courage to judge each outsider as an individual, not as a category. The wisdom to know that strength can take many forms. Pretty words, another elder sneered. But words won't protect us when the next empire comes. Neither will isolation, Kilira countered. The galaxy grows smaller every year. How long can we hide? How long before someone comes who won't be content with our borders? Alone, we're vulnerable. But with allies, with friends, with connections to the greater galaxy, we become strong. She gestured to Reed. This man has knowledge we lack. Medical techniques that could save lives. Understanding of other cultures that could help us navigate the complexities of interstellar politics. And all we offer in return is death. The human may speak, the chief elder said suddenly. Reed stepped forward, his injuries making him move carefully. He looked around the chamber, then began to speak. "My name is Reed Voss," he said. "I'm a doctor. I've spent my life studying how to heal, how to help, how to make life better for others. I came to this sector of space as part of a survey mission, mapping new systems, looking for resources that could benefit all sentient beings." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I understand your fear. My own people have a history full of conquest and subjugation. We've been both victims and victimizers. But we learned, slowly, painfully, that isolation isn't safety. It's just a slower form of death. You speak of pretty ideals," an elder said. "But the galaxy is not a kind place." "No, it's not," Reed agreed. "But kindness exists within it. Cooperation exists. Mutual benefit exists. Your people have skills and knowledge that could benefit countless worlds. Your understanding of biotechnology, your harmony with your environment. These are things the galaxy needs. And in return for sharing our secrets?" the chief elder asked. "Partnership," Reed said simply. "Not subjugation. Not exploitation. Partnership. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. Why experience it alone?" "Because alone, we are safe," the elder replied. "Are you?" Reed challenged. "When my ship crashed, your response was to hunt me. But what if next time it's not a survey vessel? What if it's a warship? What if it's a fleet? Will your isolation protect you then? Or will you face them alone, without allies, without friends, without anyone who might speak on your behalf?" The council murmured among themselves. Reed could feel the shift in the room. Not agreement, not yet, but doubt. The first cracks in centuries of certainty. An ancient voice spoke from the shadows. Elder Sci-Fi, the oldest member of the council, who rarely involved himself in debates. "I have lived for 200 years, he said, his voice dry as autumn leaves. "I have seen 60 trials. I have watched our people grow. Smaller, not in number, but in spirit. We crouch in our corner of the galaxy like frightened children, striking out at shadows." He stood, his movements slow but deliberate. "When I was young, we spoke of the stars with wonder. Now we speak of them with fear. When did we become so afraid?" "When the Korvathi," the chief elder began. "The Korvathi are dust," Sci-Fi interrupted. "Their empire is a cautionary tale told to children. Yet we still live as if their ships darken our skies. This Huntress, this young woman who has served faithfully for 20 years, she asks a valid question. Who are we fighting?" He pointed a gnarled finger at Reed. "This human crashed by accident. He fought only to defend himself. He showed mercy when he could have killed. He offers knowledge and partnership. And our response is to demand his blood? What does that say about us?" "It says we are strong," the chief elder insisted. "It says we are scared," Sci-Fi corrected. "So scared we can't tell the difference between strength and brutality." He walked slowly to where the shattered blade lay on the floor. Bending with difficulty, he picked up a fragment, examining it in the light. "The Z-Thak core," he mused. "The Soul Reaver. 4 or 5 centuries, it has drunk blood in our name. Perhaps it's time it rested." He looked directly at Kilira. "You invoke the right of challenge. As the eldest voice of the council, I accept your challenge. But know this, the old ways die hard. There will be resistance. There will be those who see your mercy as betrayal. Are you prepared for that?" Kilira nodded. "I am. And you, human? You may leave now. The Huntress has chosen not to kill you. By technicality, the trial is complete. You're free to go." Reed shook his head. "With respect, Elder, I'm not going anywhere. Kilira risked everything to spare me. I won't abandon her now." Sci-Fi studied him for a long moment, then smiled, an expression that transformed his ancient face. "Perhaps there is hope for us yet." The debate raged for hours. Ancient texts were consulted. Precedents were examined. Voices were raised in anger and lowered in contemplation. Through it all, Kilira and Reed stood together in the center of the chamber, the focal point of a battle between past and future. Finally, as the sun began to set outside, the chief elder called for silence. "The council will vote," he announced. "All in favor of upholding the traditional interpretation of the trial, death to all outsiders." make your will known. 7 lights flared in the darkness, all in favor of accepting the challenge, of re-examining our laws and our relationship with the greater galaxy. Make your will known. 5 lights answered, including Sci-Fi's. Kilira's heart sank. 7-5. The old ways would prevail. But then something unprecedented happened. The lights began to flicker, not in the council ring, but throughout the chamber. The watching crowd, silent until now, began to make their own will known. Hundreds of tiny lights flared to life. Citizen flames, an ancient rite rarely invoked. The people speak, Sci-Fi said softly. They have the right to be heard. The chief elder's hood turned slowly, taking in the sea of lights. This is irregular. So is sparing an outsider, Sci-Fi replied. Irregular times call for irregular measures. The citizen flames grew brighter, more numerous. The younger generation especially seemed to rally to Kilira's cause, their lights burning with the intensity of those who had inherited a war they never chose. Very well, the chief elder said at last, his voice heavy with resignation. Let the full voice of Lidhar be heard. All citizens present may add their light to either side. But know this, whatever is decided here will shape our people's future for generations to come. Choose wisely. The chamber erupted in light as citizens declared their preference. The traditional 7 council flames were soon outnumbered by hundreds supporting change. Not a majority, many still feared the unknown, but enough. Enough to tip the scales. The challenge is upheld, the chief elder announced formally. The laws of trial will be re-examined. A new path will be considered. He paused, then added, May the ancestors forgive us if we choose wrong. As if in response to his words, the sky outside the chamber suddenly blazed with light. The aurora of reversal, a phenomenon that occurred perhaps once in a generation, painted the heavens in sheets of gold and silver. The ancestors speak, Sci-Fi said with satisfaction, and they speak of change. Months passed. The transition wasn't easy. Many Litharians resisted the new interpretations, clinging to the old ways. But slowly, gradually, minds began to open. Reed established a cultural exchange program, bringing Litharian healers to human medical facilities and human doctors to study Lithar's remarkable biotechnology. Trade agreements were negotiated. Defensive alliances were discussed. Kilira found herself in a new role, not as Huntress, but as ambassador. Her unique position, having been both defender of the old ways and champion of the new, made her invaluable in bridging the gap between isolation and integration. 1 year after the failed 20th trial, Kilira stood once again on the smoke-breathing hills. But this time, she wasn't alone. Reed stood beside her, his arm fully healed thanks to Litharian regenerative techniques. Below them, in the valley where she had once hunted him, a new structure was rising, the first interspecies diplomatic center on Lidhar. Regrets? Reed asked, following her gaze. Sometimes, she admitted, the old ways were simpler. Hunt, kill, honor the tradition. No questions, no doubts. But no growth either, Reed pointed out. No possibility for something better. She smiled. No chance to discover that the most dangerous prey of all is our own assumptions about the universe. A sound made them turn. A young Litharian approached, bearing news from the city. But what caught their attention was the group following at a respectful distance. Off-worlders of various species, each wearing the badge of the diplomatic corps. Ambassador, the young messenger said, bowing slightly. The council requests your presence. The Varan delegation has arrived to discuss the Mutual Defense Treaty. Kilira nodded. Tell them we'll be there shortly. As the messenger departed, she turned back to the vista before them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in familiar colors. But now, above the horizon, the lights of orbiting ships twinkled like new stars. Not threats, but bridges to a larger universe. Ready? Reed asked. Always, she replied, taking his hand. Together, they walked down the hill toward the future they had chosen. Uncertain, challenging, but alive with possibility. Behind them, the wind whispered through the stones, carrying the echoes of 20 trials. But the 21st trial, the trial of change itself, had only just begun. Years later, when historians wrote of the Great Opening, they would mark its beginning not with the signing of treaties or the establishment of trade routes, but with a single moment, when a huntress lowered her blade and chose to see the person behind the prey. And in the schools of New Lidhar, children learned a different kind of lesson. True strength isn't in never questioning tradition, but in having the courage to forge new ones when the old no longer serve. The Zethak core was never reforged. Its fragments were preserved in the Museum of Transformation, a reminder that sometimes the most profound victories come not from striking the killing blow, but from choosing not to strike at all. As for Kilira and Reed, their story became legend, not just on Lidhar, but throughout the galaxy. The huntress who wouldn't kill and the human who wouldn't die. Their tale was told in 100 languages on 1,000 worlds, each version slightly different, but all carrying the same essential truth. That mercy is not weakness, that tradition need not be a prison, and that sometimes the most radical act of all is simply to see the other as they truly are, not as enemy or prey, but as a fellow traveler in the vast, strange, wonderful journey of existence. In the end, Lidhar didn't just survive its opening to the galaxy, it thrived. The isolation that had once seemed like protection was revealed as limitation. The kill or be killed philosophy gave way to something richer, cooperate and flourish. And in the quiet moments between diplomatic missions, when the work of building bridges between worlds grew heavy, Kilira would remember that morning on the smoke-breathing hills when she had set out to take a life and instead found a reason to question why she had ever wanted to take one at all. That perhaps was the real victory, not the changing of laws or the opening of borders, but the transformation of a heart. From that single change, like ripples on water, a new future spread outward, touching lives across the stars. The 20th trial had ended not with death, but with the birth of something unprecedented, hope. And in a universe vast and dark and full of unknown dangers, hope might just be the most powerful weapon of all.